that sounds insane, you haven't met Karen, our neighborhood tyrant, with a clipboard in one hand and a lawsuit threat in the other. See, I thought I retired to a peaceful cul-de-sac in North Carolina. Instead, I moved in next to a woman who thinks the HOA bylaws are the 10 Commandments. And she's Moses. Now, I'm a reasonable man. I mow my lawn, pay my dues, and mind my own business. But Karen doesn't mind anything. She polices. And when she decided the fence line was confusing and that part of my yard looked like a great spot for her new shed, well, let's just say I stopped playing nice. Because what Karen didn't know and what made this whole thing so much more satisfying is that I had friends, federal friends. And that shed, it turned out to be the perfect place to park a few quiet microphones. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You want context? You deserve context. I'm Hank Miller, retired electrical engineer. Bought this home in 2016 with my wife Linda after 35 years in Boston. We wanted sunshine, quiet, and neighbors who waved but didn't hover. That lasted about 6 months. Karen moved in across the street in 2017. She was polite at first, fake polite. You know the type, bless your heart smiles and passive-aggressive compliments about your lawn edging. She quickly weaseled her way onto the HOA board, where she discovered the thrill of petty power. By 2018, she'd rewritten the trash can policy 3 times, fined the Thompsons for holiday decor past the acceptable removal date, and tried to have a Vietnam vet remove his flagpole because it was not approved in the original design. So when she started eyeballing the lot lines between our properties, I knew trouble was brewing. I even paid for a land survey, twice, to prove my fence was 3 feet inside my property line. But did facts stop Karen? Of course not. Early last spring, while Linda and I were visiting our daughter in Virginia, Karen took it upon herself to reclaim what she claimed was her land. We came back to find a freshly poured concrete pad, a 10 by 10 vinyl shed, and her smug little face telling us, "It's within my rights." Not only was it not, but she had also dragged the HOA board into it, convincing them that I was the aggressor for refusing to resolve the matter amicably. They fined me $250 for ongoing neighbor harassment, which I refused to pay. Naturally, that escalated to monthly penalties. Meanwhile, I couldn't step outside without seeing that shed towering over my tomato plants. I offered mediation. I offered to split fencing costs. Karen declined. In fact, she started storing stuff in that shed like it was hers. Lawn equipment, leftover tiles, even Christmas decor. I was angry, but I wasn't stupid. I called a friend. A former student of mine from my days teaching electrical engineering at MIT, now working in surveillance tech for the Bureau. I joked, "You know, if you guys ever need a spot for a field op, I've got the perfect little hideout, totally off the books. No one would ever suspect it." He laughed. Then he called me back 3 days later. Turned out the HOA wasn't just full of busybodies. Someone on the board was being investigated for wire fraud, diverting community funds through shell maintenance contracts. It was a mess. They needed discreet audio coverage from within the HOA decision-making circle. And suddenly, Karen's shed, on my land, mind you, was prime real estate. We made it legal. I leased the 10 by 10 footprint of dirt the shed sat on to the federal government for $1 a year. They installed non-intrusive equipment completely within the law, and the surveillance began. Karen, bless her soul, had no idea she was hosting a sting operation. So yeah, Karen tried to steal part of my yard and got her shed turned into an FBI safe house. And that's just the beginning. You won't believe what we caught on those tapes, or how she reacted when she found out. Let's just say, the woman who fined me for a slightly faded mailbox didn't handle being federally monitored very well. Part 2's coming soon. Trust me, you'll want popcorn. You'd think that renting your enemy's shed to the federal government would feel like the climax of the story. But in Karenland, things never just settled down. In fact, turning her beloved shed into an FBI surveillance post, that was just the matchstick. The fireworks were still to come. Let me rewind a bit. So by the time the Bureau moved in, discreetly, quietly, with all their little gadgets and wires, I'd almost forgotten the shed was even there. I kept my distance, watered my tomatoes, grinned a lot more than usual. Karen, on the other hand, must have sensed something was off. She started hovering, you know the type, sunglasses pushed too far up the nose, standing a little too close to the shed, pretending to weed her flower bed while her head swiveled like a hawk. I guess the silence was bothering her. Maybe she expected me to throw a fit or file another complaint. But I didn't, because I already won. I just hadn't told her yet. Now here's where it gets juicy. Turns out Karen's little kingdom wasn't as secure as she thought. Remember how I mentioned the HOA had been playing fast and loose with the budget? Well, according to the agents, over $43,000 had quietly disappeared from the community maintenance fund over the last 2 years. That's money meant for things like fixing potholes, repainting the clubhouse, and replacing the busted sprinkler system in the park. Instead, it was going to Green Path Landscaping, a company that, after some digging, didn't exist outside of an LLC registered to one of Karen's best friend's nephews. Coincidence? Sure, but the feds didn't think so. Over the next few weeks, Karen hosted 2 special HOA sessions in the shed. Yes, in the shed, as if she were queen of HOA land holding court in her vinyl palace. The FBI caught every word. She talked about controlling the vote, managing dissent, and handling the Millers if they don't back off. That last part got a laugh in my kitchen. My wife Linda nearly spit her coffee. "Handle us?" she said. "I'd like to see her try." Now here's the kicker. Karen wasn't content just squatting on my land and laundering HOA funds through her nephew's fake company. No, she decided to go nuclear. One Tuesday morning, I got a certified letter from the HOA board accusing me of refusing mandatory architectural compliance. Apparently, the garden bench in my backyard, one I'd had since 2017, was non-conforming with community aesthetic standards. She wanted it removed. The bench, in my backyard, behind a 6-foot privacy fence. Now, I'm no lawyer. Well, not technically. I did get my JD in my 50s, mostly to keep my brain sharp in retirement. Passed the bar in '09. Never practiced, but I know enough to smell a setup. So I responded the way any reasonable man with FBI support and a full paper trail would. I lawyered up. 2 days later, the Bureau showed up at my door, not in black SUVs, but in khakis and polos. Just friendly folks, looking for a secure location to conduct a final briefing. They brought donuts. They also brought warrants. Apparently, the evidence gathered through the shed surveillance had finally reached the tipping point. Karen wasn't just mismanaging funds. She was forging votes in HOA elections, tampering with community ballots, altering minutes from meetings to push her agenda through, and, cherry on top, attempting to oust board members who questioned her. She had effectively turned the HOA into her own petty little regime, and now the regime was crumbling. That Friday night, the HOA called an emergency general assembly in the community clubhouse. Turnout was record-breaking. Retirees and loafers, moms with toddlers, even teenagers showed up just to watch the fireworks. I showed up with a manila envelope. Karen showed up in heels and pearls, smiling like she'd won a cruise. The Bureau agents sat quietly in the back, not saying a word. I gave them a nod. One of them winked. The meeting began. Karen launched into a speech about unity in the neighborhood and how ungrateful residents were weaponizing gossip. She said there were bad actors sowing discord. That's when I stood up. Bad actors? I said. You mean like people who build sheds on private property without permits? Or ones who funnel community funds through fake landscaping contracts? The room went still. I handed my manila envelope to the HOA secretary. Inside were copies of land surveys proving the shed was on my land, the lease agreement with the Bureau, transcripts of the surveillance audio, a notarized list of altered HOA documents Karen had submitted. Karen's face drained faster than a kiddie pool in August. When she tried to speak, one of the agents in back stood and calmly said, "Ma'am, we'd like to speak with you outside." And just like that, heels clicking, voice trembling, Karen walked out of her own meeting under federal escort. The shed? Removed within the week. Karen, facing charges. HOA, voted to dissolve the current board and hold new elections, with independent oversight. And the bench in my backyard? Still there, sturdy as ever. I even put a plaque on it that reads, "In memory of HOA overreach. Sit long, laugh loud." If you thought Karen walking out of the HOA meeting flanked by federal agents was the end of it, you're adorable. See, folks like Karen don't go away. They linger. Like a skunk under the porch or a political yard sign left up 5 months after the election. I should have known better than to think she'd disappear quietly. Because just 2 weeks after the FBI took down her little HOA empire, Karen made a comeback and she brought flamingos. No, not real ones. Plastic ones. Hundreds of them. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. After the fallout of Karen's arrest, things actually felt peaceful around the neighborhood. The shed was gone. The HOA was temporarily suspended while the state reviewed our bylaws. People were walking their dogs without fear of being cited for leash length. For a moment, it felt like a real community again. Linda baked banana bread for the new neighbors. I fixed the loose step on the clubhouse deck. Voluntarily, no committee approval needed. It was nice. Too nice, because about 10 days into this suburban utopia, we noticed something odd. A small drone, buzzing around the cul-de-sac. Every evening, hovering specifically over our house. At first, I thought it was one of the neighborhood teens, maybe trying out a birthday gift, but it kept showing up. Same time, same altitude, just close enough to be intrusive. Then one night, Linda, who's normally more patient than a golden retriever, grabbed the binoculars, stormed out onto the back porch and shouted, "Tell Karen she can come snoop in person if she misses us that much." The drone zipped away like it had been caught red-handed. Turns out, after being asked to resign from the HOA, Karen had rebranded herself. No longer community governance chair, she was now a self-appointed neighborhood wellness coordinator, a title she made up and printed business cards for. She claimed she was documenting potential code violations to help keep our area safe, clean, and spiritually harmonious. Now, let's be clear, Karen didn't live here anymore. She had moved in with her sister 3 miles away while waiting for her court dates. But that didn't stop her from showing up daily. Parked across the street in her beige Honda CR-V, watching. The woman was HOA-less and still patrolling like she had a badge. Then came the flamingos. One morning we woke up to find 12 bright pink flamingo lawn ornaments lined up in our yard. At first we laughed, thought maybe the neighborhood kids were pulling a prank. But each flamingo had a laminated tag around its neck. And on each tag, in Comic Sans font, was a different violation. Things like improper mulch color, pine bark exceeds HOA tonal guidelines. Unlicensed rain barrel, subject to water flow misdirection. Flagpole angle too acute, potential hazard during high winds. Backyard bench still offensive to community aesthetic. Now remember, the HOA no longer existed. Karen had made her own flamingo citation system. We pulled them up, had a laugh, tossed them in the garage. The next day, 24 flamingos, all new violations, some quoting non-existent sections of state law. This continued for 5 straight days. The number of flamingos doubled each morning. We were on track to have a pink army on the lawn by Sunday. Now look, I'm not a vengeful man. I've always believed karma handles things better than I ever could. But there's a point where satire becomes harassment. And my front yard, looking like a cheap Vegas tiki bar, was that point. So I called a lawyer friend. Then I filed a civil complaint for 1, harassment, 2, invasion of privacy via drone surveillance, 3, defamation. She posted the violations online. 4, trespassing. 5, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Linda was having nightmares about pink birds. We served Karen the papers during one of her drive-bys. She didn't even get out of the car, just rolled down the window and muttered, "You people have no sense of humor." Ma'am, this isn't comedy, it's insanity with a yardstake. The final straw came when Karen crossed not just legal lines, but airspace lines. One afternoon, her drone hovered a little too low, right above my dog, Murphy. Murphy's a 12-year-old golden with a limp, not exactly a predator. But the buzzing spooked him, and he bolted. He ran straight into traffic 2 blocks over. Miraculously, he wasn't hit. But that was it. I'd had enough. I called the FAA. Because Karen's drone? Unregistered. Flying below the legal limit. Used to stalk private residences. It took less than 48 hours for the drone to be confiscated and a hefty fine issued. Karen showed up to protest the next morning, holding a sign that read, "I am the real victim." Nobody joined her. Our court date finally arrived. The judge, bless him, was a tired-looking man in his 60s who'd clearly seen one too many neighbor disputes. He skimmed through the stack of flamingo photos, shook his head, and asked Karen just one question. Why would you escalate a shed dispute into a community harassment campaign involving plastic birds? Karen launched into a tirade about standards, civic duty, and how she was fighting moral decay. The judge looked at her, then at me, then back to her and sighed. Ma'am, I'm ordering you to pay restitution for property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress. And I'm granting a permanent restraining order against further contact or surveillance of Mr. Miller and his property. Then he paused. And I am very tempted to ban you from ever purchasing lawn ornaments again. I swear he smirked. Karen's influence? Gone. Her fake wellness coordinator blog? Shut down. The Flamingos? Donated to a local theater for their spring musical. You're welcome, high school drama club. As for me, the garden's blooming, the flag's flying. Murphy's got a new squeaky toy shaped like a flamingo. Poetic justice. Linda's finally sleeping through the night. And the bench, still standing, still legal, still fabulous. You'd think after being hit with a restraining order, court fine, and the FAA breathing down her neck for drone violations, Karen would have finally learned her lesson. She didn't, because this wasn't just any Karen. This was a 4th of July Karen, and if there's one thing more dangerous than a suburban tyrant with too much time on her hands, it's a suburban tyrant who thinks patriotism means she gets to control the neighborhood parade. Let's set the stage. In our North Carolina suburb, the 4th of July is the biggest community event of the year. We're not fancy, no huge floats, no celebrity guests, but we do it right. Kids on bikes with streamers, the local VFW color guard leading the march, a few classic cars, a pickup truck blasting Springsteen, and of course, a neighborhood potluck in the park afterward. It's small-town Americana at its best, the kind of thing where you wave at folks you haven't seen since Christmas, and everyone pretends not to care who brought store-bought potato salad. This year was going to be extra special, our first Karen-free celebration in years, or so we thought. A week before the parade, I'm sipping iced tea on the porch when our neighbor Bill pulls up, eyes wide, whispering like he's seen a ghost. You're not going to believe this, he says. Karen's entering afloat in the parade. Excuse me? Bill hands me a flyer that had been taped to the clubhouse door. The spirit of HOA excellence, a tribute to order and aesthetics. Ball presented by Karen Elizabeth Goodwin, formerly HOA chair, currently community visionary. I almost choked on my tea. Let me be clear, Karen had no affiliation with the event. She wasn't invited. She wasn't registered through the parade committee. And yet, she was planning to crash it with her own DIY float. The float, if you can even call it that, was a trailer hitched to her sister's Ford Explorer, covered in red, white, and blue plastic bunting, fake ivy, and yes, mini flamingos spray-painted like American flags. Front and center was a podium. On it, a mannequin dressed like Karen, complete with blonde bob wig, pearls, and a sash that read, Order, Discipline, Pride. Behind it, speakers ready to blast Sousa marches and banners with slogans like, Restore community standards, Reject lawn neglect. Mediocrity is not patriotic. It was like watching a totalitarian regime's beauty pageant float. North Korea meets Hobby Lobby. I was on the parade planning committee, mostly for the hot dogs. But when the others found out Karen was attempting to hijack the lineup, they panicked. She can't be in the parade, Marcia whispered. She's not even on the list. She has a restraining order, I reminded them. She's literally banned from being within 100 feet of my house, which is on the parade route. We considered asking the sheriff's department to step in preemptively, but legally, unless she violated the order in real time, there was little they could do. So we made a different plan. If Karen wanted to make a public appearance, we'd make sure she got a very public reaction. Here's how we handled it. First, we rerouted the parade path slightly, just enough that it avoided my property line by about 20 feet, keeping us technically legal. Second, we moved Karen's float to the end of the parade, the very end, behind the trash truck and a local jazzercise group with speaker issues. We labeled her float self-nominated, civic inspiration, unjudged. Third, and this was Linda's idea, we handed out little red foam signs to parade goers that read, I freedom and reasonable lawn decor. By the morning of July 4th, over 200 people had one in hand. The parade kicked off beautifully. The veterans got a standing ovation. The kids looked adorable in their sparkly helmets. Someone even brought a rescue alpaca wearing sunglasses. We don't ask questions. Then 20 minutes behind schedule came the jazzercise ladies. Then the trash truck. And finally, Karen. Her float rolled down the street to crickets. No applause, no waves, just rows of polite stares and 200 foam signs held high. As she passed the grandstand, Karen, riding in the back seat like a beauty queen in exile, stood up and started giving a speech. No mic, just yelling. Order is freedom. Without structure, we're nothing. Flags must be level. Someone yelled, sit down, Karen. Someone else mooed, don't ask. Then her speaker system glitched, blasting the wrong audio file. Not Stars and Stripes Forever, but a recording of her HOA meeting meltdown. You know the one where she said, if these neighbors won't comply, we'll make them. We'll outlast them. I am the HOA. I looked at Linda. She looked at me. We didn't do it. Someone else had hacked her Bluetooth. That's when the crowd lost it. Laughter, applause. And one guy near the hot dog stand just started chanting, USA, USA. Karen slumped into the seat. Her float crept forward, like a dejected lawn ornament in exile. Karen didn't stay for the potluck. She didn't show up for the fireworks. And she hasn't been seen around the neighborhood since. Her sister moved the Explorer a few days later. The Civic Inspiration banners ended up in the clubhouse, lost and found. No one claimed them. As for us, we had the best 4th in years. The veterans thanked us for standing up for the community. The kids got free popsicles. And Linda finally won the pie contest with her lemon chess. Justice with whipped cream. By now, you'd think Karen had run out of gas. After being escorted out of the HOA, dragged through court for the Flamingo fiasco, humiliated in the 4th of July parade, and slapped with a restraining order, any reasonable person would have taken the L, packed up their pearls, and started a quiet new life in a town that doesn't know what HOA even means. But Karen doesn't take L's. She writes letters, angry ones, certified ones. And one of those letters would eventually land her on the evening news, and not in a good way. Let me walk you through how she made her grand finale. Spoiler, there were sirens. 2 weeks after the 4th of July parade, everyone thought things had finally calmed down. The weather was warm, the roses were blooming. Murphy, my golden retriever, had finally stopped growling at beige SUVs. Then it came. A thick, white envelope slid into every mailbox on our street. No postage, hand-delivered in the dead of night. The return label read, Community Restoration Plan, from the desk of Karen E. Goodwin. Inside, a 7-page manifesto typed in 12-point times New Roman, single-spaced, with color-coded sections and footnotes. Here are just a few actual quotes. What we are experiencing is not a neighborhood, but a breakdown of civilized decorum. Front yard wind chimes contribute to sonic disorientation and should be banned. The Millers have weaponized patriotism in ways that destabilize collective order. This is not a personal vendetta. This is a moral obligation. She included a homemade petition asking for signatures to form a new alternative HOA. She called it the CRE Alliance, Citizens Advocating for Regulation and Excellence. No one signed it. In fact, by the next morning, half the flyers were in recycling bins. The other half were used as puppy pee pads, except one copy. I saved it for archival purposes. Now here's where it gets surreal. A local news station, WXLV Channel 45, got wind of Karen's activism through a post she made in a Facebook group titled HOA Patriots of the Carolinas. The news crew thought it was a quirky human interest story. Former HOA chair tries to reclaim neighborhood with flamingos and float. So they came out to do a short segment. They knocked on my door. They knocked on Karen's sister's door. And what started as a 90-second puff piece turned into a full-on interview showdown in front of the community clubhouse. Live, unedited, broadcast at 6:03 p.m. The clip opens with the reporter saying, "We're here in Pleasant Pines where a neighborhood dispute has become something of a suburban saga." Karen shows up in a starched white blouse holding a clipboard, flanked by exactly 2 people, her sister and a very confused man who later admitted he thought he was being interviewed about water pressure. She immediately hijacks the segment. "This used to be a community of standards," she says, waving her clipboard. Now people build illegal sheds, keep tacky benches, and refuse to mow in even lines. Then she points on camera to my house and says, "And that man, he's orchestrated a campaign of psychological warfare against me." The camera pans to me, standing on my porch, sipping sweet tea. The reporter turns to me. "Mr. Miller, any comment?" I pause, smile, then say, "Just that I'm glad the weather's nice enough to enjoy our freedom." Then I hold up a foam sign from the parade. Freedom and reasonable lawn decor. The clip went viral by 9 p.m. The interview lit a fire under Karen like you wouldn't believe. 2 days later, we woke up to spray-painted messages across the clubhouse sidewalk. Standards equals safety. Order over anarchy. And on the bench near the walking trail, Karen was right. It wasn't just graffiti, it was security footage worthy, because Karen had snuck in at 4 a.m. wearing a hoodie armed with 2 cans of spray paint and a headlamp. The HOA, the new one, recently reformed with a real legal committee and zero Karen influence, called the sheriff. Turns out violating a restraining order while committing vandalism on community property is not great. Neither is being caught on camera doing it by the same security system Karen herself voted to install back in 2018. They didn't cuff her, but they did escort her off the property. Again, this time the charge stuck. Trespassing, vandalism, restraining order violation. Court date was set. Local paper ran a headline the next day. Former HOA chair faces charges in escalating suburban dispute. The online version had 600 comments. My favorite one? Imagine being so obsessed with lawns you get arrested twice. Since then, Karen's been quiet, moved in with family upstate, last we heard. The CRE alliance was quietly dissolved. The HOA installed a community garden where the old shed used to be. It's now called Karen's Corner. Yes, that was Linda's idea. Every 4th of July, we retell the story. We pass around foam signs, and every kid gets a little plastic flamingo with the sticker that says, "Stay reasonable." It's tradition now. Look, folks, I never set out to ruin Karen. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to grow tomatoes, walk my dog, and maybe enjoy my retirement without a woman with a bad-shaped clipboard counting the angle of my flagpole. But sometimes when someone pushes and pushes and pushes, they find out the hard way that not everyone's going to roll over. Sometimes a bench is more than a bench. A shed is more than a shed. And one little act of stubbornness can expose a whole mountain of crazy. Looking back now, it's almost funny how it all started with a shed. One little shed, 3 feet over the property line, turned into a war of wills, lawsuits, drones, plastic flamingos, and live news broadcasts. All because one person believed that rules were only worth following if she was the one writing them. But here's what I've come to realize. This story isn't just about Karen. It's about what happens when power, no matter how small, gets twisted into control. It's about how community standards can turn into community control if the wrong person's holding the clipboard. And most of all, it's about what happens when good neighbors stay silent. I used to think keeping my head down was the peaceful option. Don't stir the pot. Don't make waves. Let the busybodies stay busy. But that only works until the pot boils over into your yard. When Karen started overreaching, rewriting HOA rules, fining people over lawn decor, forging votes, and eventually weaponizing plastic birds, most folks just rolled their eyes. That's just Karen being Karen. But the truth is, little tyrannies grow when they go unchallenged. So I stood up, not with fists, not with yelling, with paperwork, with patience, and with popcorn. And in the end, the law worked. The community stood together. And Karen, well, she learned the hard way that you can't silence an entire street with a clipboard and a passive-aggressive smile. Today, our neighborhood feels different. People wave more, they talk, they joke about flamingos, sure, but underneath, there's a new sense of trust. Because we all went through it together. We saw how one bad actor can make people afraid to speak up, and how good people, working together, can take that power back. Murphy still limps a little, but he's happy. Linda's bench still stands. And me? I finally planted tomatoes again, and no one's complained, not even once. If you've made it this far, first off, thank you. Seriously, This wasn't just a story, it was therapy. But now I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments below, have you ever dealt with a Karen, got an HOA horror story, or maybe a small victory where the little guy stood up and won? I read every single comment, and trust me, you are not alone. Let's turn this into a space where people can share, laugh, and most importantly, feel seen. Because whether it's flamingos or fence lines, drones or dog leashes, we've all got a story. So hit that comment button, drop your tail, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this saga made you laugh, nod, or say, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. Because one thing's for sure, HOA Karens may come and go, but good neighbors stick together. Until next time, stay kind, stay reasonable, and please don't install a shed without a permit.